Each adventure presents one contained story, but your campaign tells a more expansive one. Think of each adventure like an episode or arc, and the campaign as a whole series. Though each adventure might tell a vastly different story, they should all tie into the themes and characters that stretch across the whole campaign. A campaign introduces multiple stories. The events of each adventure, the personal triumphs and failures of each PC, and the stories of NPCs who appear throughout. That means a campaign can become more than the sum of its parts. As you prepare for your campaign, you'll establish its scope and themes, which you'll then reinforce in the adventures and scenes that take place within it. When you start out, you'll likely have a core structure in mind for your campaign, but through play, it can, and should, grow and evolve. The length of a campaign can range from just a few sessions to many years. You can estimate how long a campaign will take by looking at the amount of time you actually have to play, or the number of character levels you intend the characters to advance. It typically takes 3 to 4 sessions for a group to level up. Since you'll probably cancel sessions on occasion, playing once a week for a year results in roughly a 14-level campaign, playing every 2 weeks for a year gives you an 8-level campaign, and playing monthly allows for a 5-level campaign. If you play monthly, you might consider holding longer sessions and using fast advancement. Some campaigns go all the way to 20th level, ending after the player characters attain the height of power and confront the greatest threats any mortal could face. Others end at a lower level, after the group takes down a major villain or solves a crucial problem. And still other campaigns end when the players become unable to attend or decide it's a good time to stop playing. You should have an endpoint in mind when you start a campaign. Still, you have to be flexible since you're telling the story alongside other players, and your initial expectations for the campaign might be proven incorrect. It pays to be conservative when estimating your campaign's length and scope. It's always tempting to run a 20-level epic campaign with complex interwoven plots, but such games can fall apart long before the end if your group can only play once a month and the players have other responsibilities. When you think you're heading toward a satisfying conclusion, check in with the other players. You might say, I think we have about 2 sessions left. Does that work for everyone? Is there any unfinished business you want to take care of? This lets you gauge whether your assumptions match up with the rest of the group and allows you to make any necessary adjustments. When building your campaign, you can use the following structures as a starting point. One shot. An adventure lasting 1 session, a one-shot works well for a highly themed adventure using characters or concepts that are novel, but that players might not want to stick with long term. Brief campaign. This structure is meant for a brief, self-contained campaign. It can be ideal for introducing new players to Pathfinder and can be extended to a longer campaign if the group wishes. Extended campaign. An extended campaign works well for a dedicated group that might want to switch to a new campaign or a different game after a year or so. It allows for significant character and plot development, but doesn't reach the higher levels of the game. Epic campaign. An ambitious and complex game, the Epic campaign takes the PCs all the way to level 20, pitting them against the greatest threats in the world and beyond. This can be challenging in terms of time commitment and complexity, but it lets the PCs develop into true legends, and the players will likely remember it for years. The themes you choose for your campaign are what distinguish it from other campaigns. They include the major dramatic questions of your story and the repeated use of certain environments or creatures. They can also include embracing a genre beyond traditional high fantasy, such as horror or paranormal. The themes you choose for your campaign also suggest storyline elements you might use. A storyline's themes usually relate to the backstories, motivations, and flaws of the player characters and villains. For example, if you've chosen revenge as one of the themes for your game, you might introduce a villain whose quest for revenge tears his life apart and causes tragic harm to those around him. Or you might choose a theme of love, leading to non-player characters involved in doomed romances, seeking to regain lovers they've lost, or courting the player characters. In a campaign that includes multiple adventures, a smooth transition from one adventure to the next ties the story together. You might use NPCs who appear in both adventures, a treasure or a clue found in one adventure that becomes important in a later one, or even fallout from one adventure that causes the next adventure to take place. Related locations can help too. Adventures that take place in neighboring regions, or both in the same region, have an inherent link. If they take place in 2 different places, you'll need a reason the PC should travel between the 2. And you can use the journey as a short, interstitial adventure. Using similar locations and related creatures helps you form connections between disparate adventures. For example, you might have the players explore a frozen tundra early on, then later travel to an icy plain filled with more difficult challenges that can be overcome using knowledge they've previously developed. Likewise, hobgoblin soldiers might be tough enemies for your group at low levels, but as the PCs attain higher levels and the hobgoblins become mere minions of another creature, the players feel a sense of progression. Over time, the players feel like their characters are becoming experts at negotiating with giants, navigating seaways, battling devils, exploring the plains, or dealing with whatever the recurring elements are. Consider how each adventure's theme plays into the campaign as a whole. You might want to keep similar or recurring themes, especially if each adventure is part of one overarching storyline. On the other hand, this can feel repetitive. Some groups prefer variety in seeing their characters play off of different situations. To convey shifting themes, you can show established parts of the world changing to reflect the new theme. For instance, if you're switching from an adventure about subjugation to one of mayhem, the PCs could take down a villain who wants to cruelly rule over the populace, but then face opportunistic brigands who loot and pillage once the order breaks down. Ask what you and the other players enjoy and would like to see in the game. You can use these ideas as touchstones to build off of. When you get into the campaign itself, the PC's goals come to the forefront. Find out what each character wants to achieve and look for opportunities you can place in the game world and adventures. Consider which part of the game most closely ties to each goal. A PC who wants to build an institution will need money and interpersonal connections, so you can use treasure and NPC interactions to give them the resources they need. For a character whose purpose is to help people in danger, build some encounters that include people who need to be rescued. Look for good times to recap the state of a character's goals and remind the player how their character has progressed, particularly when something changes in relation to their goals. The long-term goals section on page 45 gives you more details on how you can use goals in downtime. As the group moves through the campaign, the events of their adventures in downtime should change the world around them. Show this through the responses the characters get from other people, the scenery they see around them, and their environment. You might be able to anticipate some changes, but most will come up in play and require you to make adjustments later on. As the game progresses, the power level of the PCs and their foes increases. Going up in level brings new, stronger abilities into the game, and likewise, adventures bring in new monsters with commensurate capabilities. Higher level adventures should present new challenges appropriate to the PC's abilities, such as areas that can be accessed with flight at 7th level or higher. Beyond just the rules, PCs should elicit different reactions from the people they meet as their reputation spreads, and they exhibit abilities beyond what most people have ever seen. Consider including villains who can appear multiple times over the course of several adventures. They don't necessarily need to be masterminds. Imagine an unscrupulous mercenary who works for major villain after major villain. When you create a recurring villain, it's best not to make them too integral to the story, since the PCs might take them down earlier than you expect. Have some contingency plans in place. The advice about role-playing NPCs on page 13 applies especially to these recurring villains. As they reappear throughout the campaign, they should change in some of the same ways PCs do. Think about how previous run-ins with the PCs have shaped the recurring villains' emotions and plans. Which PC do they have the biggest grudge against and why? Do they bear scars from previous battles? Have they developed a countermeasure against the PC's spells or tactics? Just as PCs have goals, so do your villains. A recurring villain might have a vision for what the world should be and a step-by-step plan to get there. A plan gives you a clear way to progress the plot, and an underlying goal guides you in deciding what the NPC does if their plans go awry. It can be especially helpful to contrast the villain's goals with those of the PC's. If a PC wants to establish a trade network, maybe a villain plans to get rich robbing caravans or merchant ships. Just like with the PC's goals, show how the villain's goal has impacted the world, even in small ways. Try to find ways the villain can make a difference, even if the PCs are successful against them. For instance, the villain might turn a memorable NPC to their cause, set an institution ablaze, or invade a village. Remember that a villain will look ineffective if the PCs foil every single plot or plan. Before your first session begins, communicate back and forth with the players about the following details to make sure you've planned your campaign to fit their preferences. Then recap and communicate your final decisions. Establish the expected schedule and, generally, how long you expect the campaign to last. It's okay if you don't know the total length for sure, but you should still give an estimate. Inform the players when and where the first session will take place, what they should prepare in advance, and what materials to bring. If you're running session 0 to create characters first, let them know. You might also need to tell them whether to bring food, drinks, and other supplies beyond what they'll use for the game itself. Let the players know of any restrictions or extra options for character building. Even if you plan to run a session 0, give them a heads up before the session starts. Tell the players where in the game world the first session will take place. And finally, give the players a basic idea of the genre or theme. If you're running a session 0, read the session 0 section on page 9 for advice on your first session. For the first time you play through an adventure, follow these bits of advice. First, recap the basics of the campaign you established earlier, particularly where it starts, and any themes you feel will be important for the players to understand as they roleplay. Second, have the players introduce their characters. If they have detailed backstories, it's usually best they start out just describing what the other PCs could learn from first impressions. If they want to go deeper into their backstory during play, they can do so later. Next, ask questions about the characters. Note down anything you think will be significant, so you can adjust your plans for later sessions. You'll also want to keep doing this throughout play. Finally, begin the adventure using the Start a Session steps on page 11. For your first adventure, find a good place for the PCs to meet and a reason for them to be together. A typical campaign starts at first level, but you can start at a higher level if you choose. Doing so can be especially satisfying for a one-shot or short campaign, or if you want to play a specific adventure made for higher level groups. Regardless, the PCs should all start at the same level. They simply make a first level character, then level it up the number of times needed to reach the starting level. The character wealth table on page 61 indicates how much currency and what common items of various levels the character should start with. Let the players choose their own items, as well as spend their currency on common items if they choose. This table gives them fewer items than they might have had if they had gained items through adventuring, but this balances the fact they can choose what items they want. A campaign might have a well-planned, emotionally resonant ending that executes perfectly, or the group might die in ridiculous fashion at the worst time possible. It's important that the ending follows the story, wherever it has gone, even if it doesn't match the idea you had in your head at the start. Check in with your group to see how long they want the campaign to go on, especially when you're getting close to the end of each adventure. Check in with yourself too, and express your opinion to the other players. Ideally, you know at least one session in advance that the end is coming, allowing you to prepare for a thrilling conclusion. You might plan for the final session's gameplay to be a bit shorter, possibly just one big showdown. That allows time for an epilogue and for the group to reminisce and decompress at the end. An epilogue can make the end of a campaign more fulfilling. First, let the group finish out their role-playing in the final moments of the adventure until they're content. Then tell the group the results of what they accomplished in broad terms, with concrete details of what happens to certain places or allied NPCs. Ask the players what their characters do after the adventure. You might even want to narrate a few short scenes. When your epilogue is done, thank everyone for playing. If the campaign ended in success, give yourselves a round of applause. A victorious ending warrants celebration. If a campaign ends prematurely, get a sense from the players about whether they want to continue. The advice on total party kills on page 33 should be helpful. If the campaign ended in a stranger way than a total party kill, say a PC handing over the relic the villain needed to complete their master plan, you can still look for ways the campaign might continue. Maybe the PC struggled to survive in the world after the calamity, or maybe they have just enough time to still be able to stop the plan. If the group plays another campaign in the same world that takes place after your previous campaign, think through the repercussions of the last campaign and change the world as needed. You might introduce new elements into the world that call back to the previous campaign. Newly powerful factions, new settlements, or new options for player characters, such as backgrounds. All based on the impact the previous PCs made on the world.